Hello and welcome to the latest Racing News 365.com Formula One podcast episode. My name is Balve Bains, and with me, as always, our Asian correspondent Michael Butterworth and editorial director Dieter Rencken. Gentlemen, we are just a few short days away from the first race after our spring break. Dieter, I can never pin you down where you are in the world. Dieter, I assume you're in a car at the moment?
Absolutely. As you can see from the backdrop, yes, I'm in a car. I'm parked at a motorway services in the UK, having landed about an hour and a half ago from Cologne. And I got back yesterday from Croatia, where I'd been on the Rally Croatia. I got back late yesterday afternoon. So it was literally a matter of packing the suitcase, getting to the airport first thing this morning. And here I am. But Rally Croatia was certainly a wonderful experience. I love rally. My original motorsport roots on rally, and I really love rally. I'm not saying it's better than Formula One, not at all. They're completely different. And as I keep saying to people, in fact, I said it on Croatian TV the other day, because they said, what's better, rally or Formula One? And I said, they're as different from each other as, say, rugby and football. The mere fact that they both get played with a ball is about the only common thing. In this case, they get played with cars, but they are completely different disciplines, and one can be a fan and a lover, a passionate lover of both.
Yeah, they're not worse or better. They're just different. So Dieter, I'm going to call you Mr. Worldwide from now on. I can't pin you down. But Dieter, thank you so much for joining us. Michael, how has your week been?
No exciting travel for me, I'm afraid, Balve. Just in Beijing, as always, counting down the days and crossing off the days in my calendar until the end of this 4-week hiatus between Grand Prix. And we're almost coming to the end of it now, into the home stretch before Baku this coming weekend, which I'm very excited about.
I'm same as you, Michael. So excited. But before we preview the race in Azerbaijan this week, Dieter, there's been some change at Mercedes.
Yes, indeed. James Allison has come back as the F1 technical director. As we know, about 2 years ago, he moved across, became chief technical officer for the entire motorsport F1 group, which includes the Mercedes Appliance Sainz division. And he was doing a lot of work there on sports like cycling, on yachting, and also some of the contractor work for outside companies. No big surprise. In fact, I wrote to Mercedes about a month back, and I said, are you going to bring back James Allison? No plans to change. And in fact, Mike Elliott will be very much in Saudi Arabia this weekend, etc., etc., etc. But let's be honest, the car concept, which was designed under, and I use that term decidedly, under Mike Elliott, was not spectacularly successful. We all know that. So I'm not surprised that they brought James back. I mean, this does happen all over the place in motorsport. If we take Ferrari, every now and then, if the car doesn't deliver what it should or could, they call up Rory Byrne, who was their old chief designer in the Michael Schumacher and subsequent years, and they say, can you give us a hand? So that seems to be what they've done with pulling James Allison back. Let's be blunt. James was responsible for the total technical department anyway. All that's happened is that he's now taking a closer, keener look at the F1 team. The nature of it is rather interesting because they've kept Mike Elliott on. But it's something that over the years I've got used to with Mercedes. They do have an unusual approach to personnel changes. You know, we saw it with Paddy Lowe. They were quite happy for him to go across to Williams as technical director. More recently with James Vowles. So it appears as though they do tend to release people. Shaila Ann Rao, for example, was released immediately to go to the FIA. So it looks as though they do either try and keep the staff or let them go immediately, depending on the circumstance. So it will be interesting to see what James can do with the car, but above all, it will be very interesting to see how different next year's car is from this year's car and what went before.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to happen over at Brackley and Brixworth. Michael, there's been some news with sausage kerbs as well.
Yeah, so sausage curbs. This is an issue that's gained quite a bit of controversy over recent years. So sausage curbs are little sort of humps that are added to the inside of chicanes and corners, sometimes on the outside as well, to deter drivers from cutting corners and using too much of the tarmac runoff to try to gain an advantage. But in recent years, we've seen an increasing number of instances where actually the sausage curb has directly caused or certainly contributed to a much more serious accident. We saw an incident over the weekend at a race at Imola in a European Formula Regional event. A driver called Adam Fitzgerald suffered some spinal fractures after he had an incident where he ran over the sausage curb, which launched him into the air, and then sort of when he fell back down to the ground, that impact seriously injured him. His team took to Instagram to issue their disdain about the presence of these sausage curbs, and it's not an isolated incident. We've seen plenty in recent years. Last year in the Formula 2 race at Silverstone, Dennis Hauger's car was launched into Roy Nissany, actually at sort of cockpit level, from having been launched into the air from the sausage curb. The halo there unquestionably saved him from serious injury. In 2021, Abby Eaton in the W Series round at Cota, she had a spinal injury. In 2020, Sean Gelael at Barcelona. In 2019, Alex Peroni in a horrifying accident at Monza, where he was launched into the air, landed pretty much upside down on the barrier. And again, the halo there very much doing his job, saving him from serious injury. And of course, perhaps the most evocative one in 2018, Sophia Flörsch in that horrifying accident at Macau, where she was launched actually into a scaffolding that some photographers were in. And it's amazing that there wasn't serious injury or worse there. But there's a mounting body of evidence here to suggest that these are actually doing more harm than good and contributing to these accidents where people are suffering injuries and potentially very serious injuries as well when you have back and spinal injuries at play. Lando Norris, notably last year, called on the FIA to ban them. And I think it's time something was done. I think the FIA need to be looking at these and recognizing that actually maybe there's another way of doing this. Maybe we ought to be taking these away.
Yeah, I must agree with you. They certainly do need a second look. I mean, the first came onto the F1 radar at the Red Bull Ring, where ironically the Red Bull teams lost two cars, or two cars were very, very badly damaged after being launched after the sausage curbs. They do serve various purposes. You know, if we do have the sort of shark's teeth type curb, the drivers complain about those as well. So I think that there's enough reason for the FIA to look at the overall curb question. But ultimately, what we should never forget is that the curbs are there because drivers shouldn't even go anywhere near them. That's the track limit. And if a driver does that, then, frankly, he must know what the consequence could be. I realize that at times you can't stay away because you might get punted off and pushed wide or whatever else. But ultimately, if there was a brick wall there, you could bet your bottom dollar they would not have gone over it or into it. So I think the whole question needs to be looked at very, very carefully on a pro and con basis. What are the pros of these things? What are the cons? What are the alternatives? And come up with something which can apply everywhere, including, and let's not forget, or curbs also need to suit the motorcycle people. So it's not that easy. You know, if you take the Red Bull Ring, you take Silverstone, all these circuits not only host Formula One, they don't only host MotoGP, they host all sorts of categories. And whatever curb solution is found actually needs to apply to all the categories that a circuit hosts. And I know right now there's very close cooperation between the FIA and FIM, the motorcycle equivalent, on curb design to try and come up with an optimum solution.
It's definitely a hot topic at the moment. Another hot topic is Hyundai, Dieter, with a possible F1 entry. You wrote an article on racingnews365.com, a website.
Correct. I mean, certainly I wouldn't like to portray that Hyundai are lining up to join next year, but it's certainly on their radar. I spoke to Cyril Abitbol while I was on Rally Croatia, of which we'll talk about shortly. But I spoke to him about it there, and he basically made the point that Hyundai Group needs to look at the optimum platform to showcase their various technologies, in particular electrification. Formula One from 2026 onwards is moving to a 50-50 IC engine electrification sort of split. I believe that the electrification side will grow thereafter 2030. So, yeah, of course it's on their radar, but frankly, that said, it should be on every OEM's radar. If an OEM doesn't at least say, what about Formula One, then frankly, their motorsport department aren't doing the job. The answer could be, yes, but we reject it. That's great, but you should actually be looking at all options on a regular basis. Porsche did, for example. Ultimately, it came to naught, but they looked at it. Hyundai are going to look at it. I'm 100% confident they'll look at it, but it may only be a 50-50 chance of coming in. But the important thing is that Formula One is on the radar of various OEMs.
Yeah, I think when Cyril Abiteboul joined Hyundai at the beginning of 2022, there was a lot of 2 + 2 = 5 from interested observers in Formula One and motorsport more generally as to why Hyundai were hiring somebody like Cyril Abiteboul, who had 4 years at team principal at Renault, 2 years at Caterham, had been in Formula One pretty much constantly since 2001. He'd never been involved in rallying before, so why would Hyundai hire him? Because the bulk of their international motorsport program is the WRC. So why would you hire somebody with only or chiefly Formula One experience? Obviously, Cyril's got a lot of experience and contacts within Formula One, so people maybe thought that Hyundai were doing a little bit of due diligence to, as Dieter said, at least explore the possibility of joining Formula One at some point in the future. Cyril, when he had that 4-year stint as team principal at Renault, he was moved aside at the end of 2020. They probably didn't really push on as much as the team or he would have wanted to. Saying that, since he's left, they haven't really pushed that much on further on either. They haven't broken out of the midfield really. And I wonder if there's a part of Cyril that feels that he has unfinished business with F1 and that he'd like to have another go.
Well, I think there is that to it. I mean, ultimately, every single motorsport person, particularly the sort of top managers, would love to have won a world championship on their CV. So, of course, yes, absolutely. And I've known Cyril for many, many years, probably going on for 15 years now. And I know that he's a competitive individual. So, yeah, I would guess that his ambitions lie at the top level, wherever that may be. Equally, at the moment for Hyundai, rally is where they want to be because that suits their sort of brand strategy and whatever else. Ultimately, the overall question is what will suit Hyundai best. Who knows? They might even do it with one of the group brands. They've got Kia, they've got Genesis, which is their sort of more upmarket brand. So you've got Hyundai, which is almost the daily brand. Let's call it in broader automotive terms, the sort of Skoda or VW brand. Then you have Kia, which is slightly upmarket from that, but also a bit more sporty. And then you have Genesis, which is the sort of Audi of the group. So who knows? They may turn around and say, well, now that Audi's in, let's go into Formula One with Genesis. But again, I think the important thing is that they are actually actively considering Formula One.
You mentioned Rally Croatia earlier, Dee. What was your experience of the rally out there?
Well, it was, of course, a pretty somber event because of the unfortunate tragedy with Craig Breen last week and testing for the event. I'd gone across to basically try and get a feel for the broader question of rally and where rally is going to in the future. And so accordingly, the Craig Breen incident was discussed. The FIA is busy with a review of what happened, and I say review because they can't really investigate. It was a private test that this happened at, so of course they're very interested to know what happened. I believe it was an extremely slow speed incident, effectively a freak incident. I'm hearing speeds of well under 50 kilometers an hour, for example, at the point of impact. So from that perspective, the safety department of the FIA is getting involved in this. They are having a look at it, but as I say, it was a private test session, and therefore really it's a matter for Hyundai to communicate and talk about. But for the rest, it was a fascinating event. My first time in Croatia. We had sort of 15 to 18 degrees in the city of Zagreb, where the rally is based. Yet up in the mountains where I went on Saturday afternoon, there was snow. So you had these sort of extremes. And in fact, you can hear that I'm speaking a bit sort of stuffily because the climate changes and whatever, I don't think did too much good to my flu sensitivity, shall we say. So, yeah, but it was a fascinating incident. What was also very interesting was the fact the number of people that are working in there who've come across from Formula One. And again, we can look at the Cyril Abiteboul analogy, that ultimately motorsport is motorsport. They may be slightly different. You may play on dirt with one and on tarmac with the other one, or predominantly dirt, but ultimately motorsport is motorsport, and people love sport, and therefore they're in there. And from a Cyril perspective, whether he's managing a race team or a rally team, the fundamentals are the same. You've got to ensure that your staff produce the best car, that you have the best driver, that politically you're okay with all the rules and regulations, and then put it all together and hope that the motor manufacturer gives you bigger amounts of money every year. And that's really the basics of it. And I think that that they're doing very, very well on it.
Moving on to Formula One, Dieter, Carlos Sainz right a review request was rejected. He was very vocal on social media. What's your thoughts?
Well, I wasn't surprised, frankly. When I heard from Fred Vasseur that they were considering submitting a request for review of this time penalty that Carlos was handed down in the Australian Grand Prix for basically tipping Fernando Alonso into a spin, I was surprised that they'd done that because I could not see them succeeding. Why do I say that? There is no doubt that he did tip Fernando into a spin. But above all, to have a right of review granted, you need to produce new evidence, and I couldn't see what new evidence they would actually be providing. Now, just for the clarity of our listeners, the process is basically an incident occurs, the stewards either see it or the race director flags it up to the stewards. They have a look at it, they decide on a time penalty which cannot be appealed, and they hand down their penalty accordingly. Now, in this particular case, when you apply for a right of review, you're actually saying we have new evidence. And I sort of wondered what new evidence they could bring to the party, and as it turned out, they didn't have any. I frankly believe that what they were hoping for was maybe a sympathetic hearing because of the chaotic nature of the Australian Grand Prix, because of the very emotional outburst from Carlos at the time, that they thought, okay, well, we really have nothing to lose. Let's apply for it. And if we get a sympathetic hearing, we may get a couple of points out of it. Let's not forget right now, points are very, very important to Ferrari and for Ferrari. So that's my take on it. But overall, I was not surprised.
Let's talk about the race that's happening this weekend in Azerbaijan. Michael, we know the walls are unforgiving. What's your thoughts? What do you think will happen in the race this weekend?
Well, first of all, I mean, we've had this 4-week gap and now we've got 5 races in 6 weeks. So everyone who's been desperately searching for their fix of Formula One is going to have plenty over the next couple of months or so. Of course, this weekend at Baku, we've got this new sprint format. We've got the extra qualifying session instead of the rather pointless FP2 on Saturday, where the cars couldn't really be changed very much because they were in parc fermé conditions because of the qualifying session on Friday. In terms of Baku suiting the cars from a performance point of view, it's hard to look past Red Bull, really. I mean, the drivers are flat out for over 2 kilometers from the end of turn 16 right to turn 1. There's a huge amount of full throttle there. We know that the Honda engine is very, very potent. We also know that the Red Bull's DRS is extremely potent and much more effective than seemingly any of the other cars. But, of course, at Baku, like you said, Balve, the walls are unforgiving. There's lots of potential for safety cars, for virtual safety cars, for red flags. We had 2 virtual safety car periods last year. In 2021, we saw 2 safety car periods and a late red flag and restart. And of course, that famous incident where Lewis Hamilton pressed the magic button, went straight on and finished 15th or so. And Baku, it seems to be a trend in Formula One at the moment of street circuits, but fast street circuits. You know, when you look at some of the street circuits Formula One has had over the years, the obvious one is Monaco, but we've also had Singapore, we've had Valencia, quite sort of tight, twisty technical circuits. Now we have Baku, which is very fast. We have Jeddah, which is very fast. This year, later on the calendar, we've got Las Vegas coming on the calendar for the first time. And if all the renderings and all of the assumptions that people have are correct, that's going to be extremely fast as well. In fact, even Singapore is going to be faster this year because they've taken away a lot of the slow corners towards the end of the lap because there's some planned development work they're taking place in Singapore. So for the next few years, they're going to have a long straight towards the end of that track as well. But assuming we have an incident-free race, I think it's very difficult to look past Red Bull and Max Verstappen, who will be bidding to be the first ever repeat winner of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, because we've never had one before.
What we found in Baku, which is a rather interesting statistic, is that generally, if we have a chaotic Formula 2 race, we have an orderly procession on Sunday. And it's almost as though the drivers are having a look at it and saying, we better be careful because look what happened in the F2 race. And therefore, they sort of back off. If the F2 race goes well, they turn around and say, that was okay, so we can really go for it. And then, of course, it becomes chaotic. But a couple of points here. First of all, the schedule, the timetable has not yet been finalized for the simple reason that they don't yet have World Motorsport Council approval on the sprint race format. So having two qualifyings, so one qualifying for the sprint race, one qualifying for the main race, which is, of course, is what Formula One is hoping to experiment with. The World Motorsport Council meeting, and I believe that that's where it should be approved, but let's hold back before we do that. And the other thing that I think is interesting is that because of this real long full throttle element, I think we'll find that power units could start coming under pressure, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have one or two fairly spectacular blows.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the race. Michael, Dieter, and I will be back next week to debrief the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. We'll see you then.